everybody has to be out and gregarious and big and talkative all the time.
Well, and then the corollary becomes as I go back to my space, even in the room, my actions are taken as being some of the things that you named in the first session, even though they aren't present.
Say that one more time.
So my withdrawal to my space as an introvert are taken as being some of the negative images that you two expressed in the beginning of the first session, where you described you walk into a room and you're seen this way, or you are the ones where you're asked to clear the table on the way to the washroom. That's not quite there, but some of the others of me as an introvert not reaching out are taken as being that I'm judging the other person, when in fact I'm doing pretty much as far the opposite as possible. I'm running away.
And David, I hear that maybe you're not always running. You might also be holding space, right? You may be saying, yeah, and I'm taking a minute for me. So I think this is a beautiful point. And can we, if we're recording, like, I just want to start here, because I think what David is noting is also something. Jordan and I went back through our notes, and I'll start back at the beginning, but I'm always looping, and I'll name this: the dominant culture that we are in. It has impacts on all of us. All of us. So what David is naming is that sometimes this dominant culture hurts him, and it creates norms and stereotypes that aren't helpful to him. So like one of the norms and stereotypes we talk about in our family is that my husband is expected to not show his like soft and sensitive emotions. He's expected to not be silly and goofy and nuts. Whereas when I'm silly with my kid, everyone's like, oh, look, a silly mom. But when he's like super silly, people are like, huh, what's that tall, handsome dude doing being all like weird, right? And like, so there are so many norms in this dominant culture that sets some expectations about folks up here that are different from down here, and they literally hurt us all. So we will talk about that today. And David, I love that you brought that into this conversation. I also really want to welcome back in Jordan, because he's here and I don't see him on my screen. We are again sharing this conversation together. And then I want to acknowledge that somebody told me to sit down and be quiet for just a minute so that I can be introduced.
I think I'm a little more diplomatic than that, but we're on the same wavelength. You get that? So, Kimber, our district governor nominee designate, if you wouldn't mind to please share us, Danica's given us a few snips about a day in the life for her on some occasions, but if you could tell us a bit more about her, that would be great.
Do I have the opportunity right now to tell Danica to sit down and be quiet?
I feel like you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kimber. I am your upcoming district governor in the future, 2023, 2024. I'm from Coeur d'Alene. I have the pleasure today to introduce our beloved Danica. Some of us have gotten to know her really well. Danica Kylander is an organizational and systems change agent. She's a social entrepreneur, a Jedi trainer, and a consultant. Jedi stands for justice, equity, diversity, and impact. She's a bolt of energy for most who meet her. Danica has been called a force of nature and an inspiration by many, especially those who've seen her TED Talk, heard her speak, or attend a wild dancing seminar, which we need to revisit at some point because I'd like to hear more about that. With a blend of somatic, interpersonal, reflective, experiential exercises, Danica excels at making weird into normal and uncomfortable into fun. Particularly now, as more organizations engage in dialogues about how to create healthier, more just systems, Danica's style is direct, authentic, and playful in ways that engage participants and support lasting, equitable change. On a personal note, many of us in the district have just finished our Jedi training. It was a leadership training program. Thank you, Lynn, for putting that together. And on a personal note, Danica is warm, genuine, funny, and approachable, and we're lucky to have her. Danica, my Yoda you are. Please welcome Danica.
And I will say, please also welcome back Jordan. We are going to co-host this again today. Welcome back, Jordan.
Glad to be back, Danica. Glad to be back.
If you're okay with it, Jordan, I would like to take a page out of your book and what Kimber just noticed. And so my love of what Jordan started this first session with is that we are here as whole humans in our bodies. So what I'm going to ask you to do is breathe those bodies in. So you can keep your camera on or off. We're going to start with some breaths and then we're going to move our bodies. You move exactly as your body moves. Sometimes my body gets all wiggly and nuts, so you can watch that and just enjoy it. But I encourage you to move the way you want to. So I'm going to use my arms because it feels good. But I'm going to ask you to breathe in wherever you are, however you are. So I'm going to use my arms. You're welcome to kind of spread your wings with me. Oh, and feel free to stretch up. Oh, take a minute. So if you're joining me, I'm just going to assume for a minute you are, and that you know that your body has all kinds of choices here and you choose what you need to. But I'm going to stretch my fingers as far as they'll go, up as high as they'll go, and I'm going to gather all the potential of the universe and kind of go, just run it right through my body as I exhale. Let's do that again. Reach, spread those wings, gather the universe, the heavens, the sky. Just let it flow through. So often we can separate ourselves from the power of the world around us and each other, but right now we're going to step back into our connection. Breathe again. This time, as your fingers get to the top, I actually just want you to wiggle them. Just like shake them out and then shake your wrists and your elbows and your shoulders. So this is actually really fun if you're standing, which I'll just show you. If you're like, yeah. I like legitimately, when you want to actually do the big somatic work, this is what we're going to do. But whatever your body is saying today, so it might be like, oh, my elbows needs a little attention. So you can just like roll your shoulders. Or if you're like, hey, I'm going to take this easy, just roll your neck. Some folks love to like wake up their hands and their wrists. Kind of gently wake up your shoulders. For me, again, my body's extra wiggly, so I like to curve my back, roll it forward, inhale, and exhale, open my chest, roll it the other way, so like I'm making a C out of my body. Also, this chair is getting a whole workout today. Let's also just warm up our faces. We are going to be here in our truth today. Jordan and I just spent some time reading through these comments, and you are so beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and for being as you are and speaking your truth. And I just want to say that there's 108 people who return to this call. And oftentimes I can tell a lot about the space that folks are in, not by the first session that they showed up to, but the fact that they come back to a second session. This is for many when the rubber meets the road. This is for many when we say, like, I can stay in this conversation. I'm resilient. I want a world where everyone's included. I'm here. Now, I'm not making assumptions about folks who chose to leave or who weren't able to come back. I will just name that my assumptions of you right now is that you are in a space where you're saying, I'm ready to have this conversation. I'm going to hold that I know some things and that there are some things that I'm here to learn and that I'm going to learn it from all the people, including Danica and Jordan and the other Rotarians on this call. Yes. Jordan, I'm going to pass it to you for a minute because I see the energy lighten you up.
Yes, no, I'm excited to be here, Danica. I think we had a very solid intro session where we really had some very honest conversations. And so thank you all for engaging in those conversations. And as we talked about, we also wanted to come back into space and make sure that we were making this as accessible and reflective for you all with tools and language and things that we were using. And so one of the ways, Danica, if you think talking about just identity was one of the things that we talked about last time. Who's not at the table, who's not there. So I want to show you all just a quick visual of ways just to look at different identities, ones that are oftentimes seen and ones that are not. Remember, in the first time, we also talked about how can you look for what you don't see and all those things. So here's some things that we can intentionally look for. And I know the host disabled screen participant sharing. So if I could be made a co-host or possibly have the ability to share screen, that would be perfect. Just so we can give you all a visual of some of the identities that we know are very salient or the ones that we see a lot. And then also some that we might not see as much, but are very important. And I apologize, I missed the gentleman's name earlier who just talked about introvert versus extrovert and how that's a real orientation towards life that will inform how we see a space, how we experience a space. And it's not, might not be one that always comes to mind. Thank you all for the screen share ability. So here's a quick visual, and feel free to take a photo of this or I can email it out. But this is just identity dimensions. On this outer side, you all will see some of the ones that are most invisible or acquired or that change over time. So we're talking about things like appearance, political ideology, marital status, job classification, religious beliefs, thinking systems. Some of these things, aren't things that we see all the time, but are very present and prevalent to who we identify as individuals. When I look at someone, I don't know if you're married or not. When I look at someone, I can't assume what your job is or not, but I would imagine that those things hold very important sparks in who we see ourselves and how we go about in the world. Now, most visible, where a lot of these conversations hone in on things that we see age. Sometimes we can see sexual orientation or identity, but I think to Danica's point, that's something that we need to ask folks of just to be, hey, if they welcome us to share. Ethnicity, race, gender, physical ability, some of the things that we tangibly see, they're visible. We're like, okay, I think I can see this. Those are things that we oftentimes can try and design spaces for. And the great example as we're entering this is sometimes introvert, extrovert are things that are also important that we might not see, that we need to be mindful of as we are designing our spaces. So I just want to give you all this quick visual to think about as we're thinking about who's not at the table. Think about these things. Think about some of the things that are invisible that we might not be thinking of as we're like, okay, who's not at the table, who's not here, and how can we be mindful of these folks and the identities that they're bringing. Also, please know, this is not an exhaustive list. These are some of the many identities that folks hold, but are important for us just to consider as we're thinking about our clubs and our future. Danica?
Yeah, actually, Jordan, if you would pop that back up. And I see Maggie has a question about whether or not we'll share this. Jordan offered to share it, so I'm going to take him up on his word and say yes. And I want you to notice for a minute, like which one or two are really coming up for you, and they could be personally. Like I noticed that, like so for me during COVID, I share a fence line. I have not left my home really, right? But I share a fence line with a family that is inherently ideologically and politically so different. And so I've spent a year building relationships with folks who are ideologically, politically so different, and having to become more aware of my own political ideology. So I, in the chat, and I'll do the thing that Jordan did earlier, which is the waterfall, right? Where we, take a minute to recognize it. But you might also be noticing, hey, sometimes when I'm interacting with people, I'm not actually thinking about their thinking style or their learning style, or to the extrovert introvert. Like I'm thinking about how I'm showing up, but I'm not often thinking about how they're showing up and what they need. So take a minute, which ones are appearing for you and why? And then we'll just write them in the chat I'll give you about 10 seconds and we'll say go, and you can just. All right. And 3, 2, go ahead and hit send. Just throw them on in there. Tell us more about why. Which ones are you seeing and why? I'm seeing a lot of folks mentioning the political and ideological. I'm curious about why. Seeing religion, socioeconomic background, work background, communication and thinking style, social justice. I'm seeing an explanation that says it's framed by who we are and our background. And we're not thinking about some of these things unless it's obvious. Thank you for making that point, Jennifer. Political has judgment attached to many of the other hidden aspects. Oh, Oh, some parts of our identities have become politicized. That is what I took from that comment. Some parts of our identities have become politicized. What is the Rotary's role in that conversation? Not like not thinking about shy folks in a busy room. Thank you for bringing that up. Appearance and body image. I'll give a few more seconds for folks to share if you'd like. We're making assumptions about someone's beliefs by their clothes. Great. I have definitely done that. I am relating. Age and physical abilities. Oh, Jean says, especially with friends, I've been surprised at the reaction to my political opinions, believing that my friends must come from the same perspective. I literally did this yesterday. My daughter and I did this. We created a space that wasn't very open to conversation. We just threw in some kind of like flat judgment kind of things, and then it shut down the conversation instead of opening it up. How often do I do that? How often do I show up assuming that other people are having the same experience and perspectives as me, right? This is the work. This is the work of going, oh my God, how often do I do that? And then noticing when I do it and then stopping it and creating a new pattern, right? This is so good. Vaccine and no vaccine. I love this one from Sandy. Remember that you don't need to fill every silence. Give people a chance to think before they speak. This is an Indigenous talent. All right, Jordan, you want to take it off the screen so we can see faces again? Just want to appreciate you all for showing up and sharing. I spent some time looking over your notes from last time as well. And I just saw so many beautiful things in here. I was thinking about reading all of them, and there's so many that I actually might not be able to get back to that. But I'm going to read a few because, and here's why. As we come to these conversations around how to create spaces where all people can come together and do well in the world, come together to solve problems, right? I was like researching on the Rotary website to just make sure I'm understanding. I have so many assumptions of your goodness and of your impact and your intent. And I believe that shows up in your language here in so many beautiful ways. And I want to keep honoring that. So I'm seeing this like, can we remember to have these conversations as peace builders that the Rotarians are, right? We need to encourage more diversity in our membership. Our club could embrace our local tribe in Rotary partnership. Bravery will be required. Possibly half of my club members or more will feel very uncomfortable with a conversation like this. It's so important, but people in the club want to feel comfortable and to have fun. So we have to address the role of discomfort in learning and awakening. We need to figure out ways to increase membership, and that's challenging. Women are emerging. Our club reflects our community. I would like my club to acknowledge the ancestral lands that we are beginning on that we are on in the beginning of our meetings. We need to expand our club to be more welcoming of non-white folks in a way that doesn't just invite them to fit in with how we do it now. Let's help our communities to support and respect each other better despite different opinions and views. I want to, there's like a bunch more here I want to read, but I also want to name a few things that we are here today to just get comfortable having the conversation. So Jordan and I were thinking maybe we should acknowledge that lots of you are saying, hey, there's some stuff we need to do. And here's some specific examples, right? So like even in that chat, we were naming, here's some stuff we could learn and know about the ancestral tribes of this land. Here's some stuff that we might want to know and understand about people's gender expression, for example. Here's some stuff that we notice about cultures or communities that aren't even present. And how do we create spaces where we can have those conversations while also recognizing this is new? So I'm going to hold that for a space and throw it back to Jordan in case he has something to share.
Yeah, no, I think Danica, that's the perfect thing of what we want you all to kind of practice and get in the practice of saying, having these conversations, being comfortable with the uncomfortableness of these conversations, and knowing some specific ways to just enter into these conversations. And so I'm not going to say much to that, Danica, versus I'm just glad folks are still here, that we are figuring out how to have these conversations. Because when I think about, for example, my own Rotary Club, relationships are built through conversations. And some of the most powerful relationships we have are through service and are often through honest conversations. We're reflecting, conversing, and having meaningful relationships being built from conversations at a service project, after a service project, or in so many different ways. And so part of this is knowing how to engage these conversations in meaningful ways, and the orientation that we need to hold for them to be successful, whenever we have them.
All right, stay with me in here, Jordan. Let's talk
Okay.
about this orientation. So one of the orientations that I try to show up with, and actually I was just talking to Bob Quay about this, but is seeking to understand. I notice that sometimes if I am kind of like engaging from the dominant culture side of behaviors, I will often like listen so that I can respond, listen so that I can debate, listen so that I can critique. And I'm finding that I am actually more successful in building relationships if I listen to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share one?
Yeah, I listen to understand, I think, is everything. I think also, I was thinking of a quote by Desmond Tutu, who says, "My humanity is bound up with yours, for we can only be human together." And to me, when I think about that conversation, I also think about it as, how will our response be when folks share their experience of brokenness, of pain, of challenge? Is it immediately like, no, you're wrong? Or is it providing space to say, dang, is there something I can do to be a part of addressing this, to alleviate that? And is there a role I can meaningfully play in it? And part of it is that orientation of knowing our humanities are really interwoven together. When we talk about some of our issues, that we face nationally, different things like that, it's not one specific group's issue. These are global issues. And I think as we think about what Rotary's role is, it breaks down this fact that yes, there might be issues that are plaguing one community, but if it is attacking one community, then it's attacking all of our communities. So how do we then have conversations that are saying, hey, I hear your brokenness. I'm not going to first say, that's not true. That's whatever. I want to say, how can I be a co-conspirator with you in this work, so that we can really move forward together? And there's more tangible tools that we'll build into that, Danica.
Yeah, I love that, is the how can I be a co-conspirator with you, which I hear, and depending on who I'm talking with, but like, how do I stand with you in this? And I notice that sometimes it's easy for me to be like, yep, I want to be with you in this conversation. And sometimes I have to be like, I actually don't know how to do that yet, so I have to do homework. But I noticed in myself that sometimes I actually want to distance myself from other people. Like, particularly like, let's say we're having a conversation around racism, and I see a white person do something that, maybe it's a racial slur, maybe it's just some kind of interruption or poor behavior. Sometimes I will be like, I'm not like them. I will push aside I'll push aside the commonalities, and instead I'll kind of other them. And I just noticed that as I'm doing this work, one of the most important things to do is stay in conversation with folks who see it differently than me, and folks that when I feel like I want to distance from them, I actually really need to lean in and say, like, I see your humanity. So this often comes up for me too with like the political and ideological things, right? Because sometimes we can politicize different identities, and I have very strong opinions about like where politics belongs, like for example on my body. And sometimes I have to remember I'm speaking with a human, I'm dealing with a human. And when I put humanity first, when I put curiosity first, when I put humility first, I'm able to connect in ways that are so much different than if I put judgment first and critique. And I'll name this too, as I was going through these lists. Sometimes folks would name that. I have the sense that some folks have entered conversations around DEI, around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they have been shamed or felt shamed, or they have felt harmed, or they have felt excluded. And I will say that as we enter these conversations, we can name behavior that is harmful. We can name behavior that doesn't have a role in our communities and in our Rotary. and we will still love the people.
Absolutely. And Danica, I hope this doesn't take you too off, but I'm going to put a very long statement in the chat. It's Rotary International's diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. And you all don't need to look at it all because there's a lot in it, but it came out 2019. It's a lot in there, and it's the whole thing doesn't fit in there. But I want you all to focus on the first 5 words, the first 5 words. Nothing about diversity, equity, inclusion there. It says, as we begin this work. I want you all to think about the fact that Rotary has been around for a while, but when it comes to this conversation, we're starting off with beginning this work as an institution. So as we think about the individuals that are making this the institution, i.e. you all, we are all beginning this work. And if we're leading, like Danica said, with curiosity in these conversations, we can understand that as we are beginning this work, we can do it in a more careful way, in a more intentional way, but understanding that there are definitely levels to this, which I'm glad Danica's working with the leadership team on to work through, but also understanding that we are all collectively beginning this work, no matter where you're at, and to continue on that work as Rotary International is doing it as well.
Just going to pause for a minute so folks can read or reflect or share out if they'd like. Thank you to people who are taking time to dig deeper. As I was beginning this work in an organization, but also internally, and by the way, oh, sorry, Jordan, there's a question for you. Where did you get this?
I will send it over.
Okay. As I was beginning this work, I often felt a lot of conflict. Like I want to do this. This is right. And then I don't know how to do this. And then I would see it play out. Like I would try to have conversations in organizations about different power dynamics that were happening within our organization, but the power dynamics were happening in our own room too. And so one of the things that Jordan and I talked about is how do we create norms of just behaviors where we have the conversation, but we're also sometimes we acknowledge and notice the behavior. So I want to say this. When we're having conversations expressly about like our small group kind of conversations and in our patterns, we talk about the behaviors, not the people. Okay. We're going to talk about the behaviors and not the people. And actually, this is important. When I was growing up, we used to use the language of like racist, and that would like invoke this thought of like KKK and like crosses burning and people in white hoods and like right? And then now the conversation is around racism, which is several things, but it is a construct in society. So it is like systems, but it's also a pattern of behaviors. And we can see the pattern of behaviors in individuals. We can see them in groups. We can see them in the norms of policies and practices. And we can kind of see them as we exist out in society. So I'll give you an example of the ways that sometimes hierarchies show up. We live right across the street from a little grocery store, and this little grocery store actually has little grocery carts for my daughter. And I know this doesn't seem like a big deal, but when I go across the street and I want to include my daughter in conversations around healthy nourishment for our bodies, I can include her because she feels like she gets to be included because she pushes her own little grocery cart around. Like there is something there, somebody did the thoughtfulness of like, here's the people we normally serve. Might it be to include other folks in this experience, right? And make it meaningful for them. So my tiny daughter is not pushing a big cart. She's pushing one that's for her. And she gets excited about learning about nourishment for her body. What's happening in that chat?
Just a lot of conversations around DEI building groups. Maddie pointed out putting people in groups and making them other than us, we lose opportunities to connect.
Can we pause on that one for a minute? So I want to open up the conversation as a yes and. So this is one thing that I have often struggled with. I'm like, wait, if we're all supposed to create spaces for everybody, why don't we all just join in the same space? And I'll tell you this, and it's because sometimes our spaces are not safe for everybody to show up. And somebody had mentioned the words before about safety. Like, actually, there were questions in our chat about like, I don't often feel safe having these conversations in my Rotary district, or I don't feel safe asking certain things here or challenging certain things. So one of the things that we as community leaders often need to do is lean towards bravery. Oftentimes we are talking about in our own experiences creating brave spaces and normalizing behaviors where we say the things that are brave. And that is slightly different because folks often who have been marginalized by our communities, by our organizations, need spaces where they can actually be safe. I have sat in meetings before as a woman in a room where all men are there, and I have had my words twisted against me and then had them weaponized against me, right? And I'm still showing up in all different kinds of identities that granted me a seat at the table. So we have to be able to hold both. Sometimes when I get in a room with other women, we're able to talk about things that we experience as female identified people that we wouldn't necessarily be able to share here, but we can relate in, we can connect, we can heal, and then we can decide which of these do we need to bring forward or which of them do we just need to know within ourselves. Jordan, do you have any experiences like that?
Yeah, we actually started a listening series with our district down here in San Diego, where we specifically, in accordance with different holidays that were coming up. So for example, Juneteenth, we highlighted something like the Black experience in Rotary to help uncover it and unpack and provide spaces for folks to lean into and have those spaces, but also having moments where like young professionals can meet and other folks having just safe spaces where they can come together and share and to feel like it's not that it's separate from Rotary, but it's the beauty that all these spaces can exist together. And so please understand there's this yes and to it, as Danica was saying, where yes, there might be spaces where folks might need time to gather, but everyone is still connected in a larger Rotary circle of serving one another with service. But it's a providing spaces for folks with lived experiences to be able to say, let's talk about our lived experiences safely in this space, and then bringing it back to the larger group as we're still part of the Rotary family.
I love that. Let's talk about our lived experiences. This is the thing that I've had to really lean into, is that how often I make the assumption that somebody else's lived experience is similar to mine, that somebody else's values are similar to mine, but particularly the lived experience. I often try to kind of use that word empathy to be like, oh, I see what happened there and I can relate. And I often notice that that actually fails me sometimes because I'm trying to put somebody in my own shoes. And sometimes they're having experiences that are entirely different from mine. And so that is, again, where that both and has to come in. The yes and needs to hold the space of like, sometimes I just genuinely don't know, and I need to just sit and be quiet. Or sometimes in the places that I have, where I have some positional power or a space to share my voice, and this was one of the tools I wanted to share, sometimes I need to name and notice what's happening. So for example, if I'm in a meeting, I could say, I notice that we're hearing from a lot of people and who are speaking repeatedly, and that we're not hearing from others. So I'd like to hear from people we haven't heard from before. Now, that also has a backfire to it. So sometimes as the facilitator of a room, I have to create spaces where folks like perhaps an introvert might feel more comfortable speaking in a chat. They might feel more comfortable speaking in a small group than they do in the kind of masterclass, right? So like part of it is structural, part of it is awareness, and part of it is having the language to say, I notice. So just in your head, if you take like one thing away today, take away the words, I notice. Because one, we want you to start seeing things. And then eventually I want you to start practicing, I'm able to see what, you don't have to have all the reasons. You don't have to know why it's happening. Just start looking for patterns and behavior. I notice. What do you notice? What do you notice about yourself? What do you notice about the rooms that you're in or the spaces you're existing in?
Yeah, and to add on to that, just for that to be effective and careful with that, being careful not to notice and then put a judgment right after that, but to really come from, I'm noticing and naming what you're seeing so that folks can reflect, agree, disagree respectfully, but when it comes from noticing, it's not I noticed, or it's like I noticed all men are trash and y'all don't let us talk. And so y'all men just need to stop talking in meetings because y'all take up too much space and don't listen. You're not going for it. Versus it could be I I'm noticing that a lot of men have been speaking in this meeting, and I'm wondering if there's any other voices that might we might not have heard from. Right. So it's a softer ask. It allows other folks to also critically reflect, and folks can be able to hold that a little bit better versus, oh, now I feel like a horrible person and then I'm just never going to talk again. So it allows for more progress in our conversations, more honest conversations, more relationships across our conversations. Because here's the thing. And yes, and phrase I love to hear, help me understand, help me to hear, help me to understand. Yes, as well. And please, I hope you all are writing these down and taking these out, because these are real tangible tools of how we start building these clubs and having these conversations, coming from a space of wondering, coming from a space of noticing, coming from a space of help me understand, and really building up our collective phrases. And I even know, and I'll share some language later of possible things you can say when you want to talk with folks where you might have noticed something that might felt a little bit off as well. But these are the type of ways that we're building this space. And especially too, if it might be a person that might not feel comfortable speaking about it, maybe you could be that person to bridge and to make it noticeable. Because now we're saying, we don't want you to see what might not be seen, but now we're saying, when you see it, how can we address it so that we can say, we are going to address this together in a way where we're noticing, we're naming, and we're able to move forward in a way that we can do it successfully.
I love that. And I'm going to do the yes and again. I'm going to do the yes. Let's learn some language so that when we feel that burning in our chest and we want to say something, we can say it in a way that connects. And I'll also name this. We aren't going to enter this work perfectly because there is no perfect. And sometimes the important thing is actually that we learn from our mistakes. So we cannot rob ourselves of the opportunity to speak our truth in that moment, because we must acknowledge that we are always growing, that we are always learning. So you can say the thing now. You can ask people to help evolve and grow with you. You can change your mind. You can have an idea and hold another idea. You can have this feeling and hold this feeling. And sometimes you can have even more feelings, right? Jordan and I talked after this call, and he was like, how did it go for you? And I said, well, I was really excited to be there. And I was grateful. And I felt like a little bit weird, like I was kind of out of it. And I didn't know if I connected with anybody. And I felt like really excited for the next session, right? Like, you know that the human experience is dynamic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's roaring, sometimes it's both, right? You have sat by the ocean and felt both the like intensity and the peace. That is also happening in all of us. So if we can acknowledge that, sometimes we have the language in the moment, and sometimes we'll trip all over ourselves, or sometimes we'll sit quietly and then chew on the words we should have said, and we can go back to the conversation and say, I wish I hadn't said that. I'm sorry. Or we can go back to the conversation and say, I wish I had said this. I'm sorry that I didn't interrupt in that moment, right? Like, these are the brave conversations, not having it right, but having the courage to get in and to stay in.
I love it. I was taking notes, Danica, as you were talking. I was taking notes as you were talking.
What struck you, Jordan? What was standing out?
I was thinking about one thing. What if we developed an orientation where, yes, we have, the desire to get it right, but we have the courage to get it wrong, and really entering this space where it's like, do it, like try, and obviously, I'm not just saying take uncalculated risk, and like I'm not saying read your book, do your homework, all those type of things, but also having the courage to try. I'm reminded of moments where, if you all could think about a moment, maybe in your life, where you had a moment where you felt unseen, possibly disrespected, possibly even like violated in any way or form of how that might felt for you. And if there was someone in that moment who stood up for you or said something for you, and if you could hold those feelings of what it means to be seen, what it means to be stood up for, what it means to have those folks that walk alongside of you, I would argue that this is fundamentally what it means to be a Rotarian, and what it means for us to be called into. It calls us into being the courageous ones for the ones that often might not have access to clean water, who might not have school supplies. This is why we do these fundraisers, because we know that we could be part of being those courageous folks for folks to be seen and to be heard if they don't feel like they have the voice to say something then. And so I love what you just said, Danica. And so I encourage you all also to figure out in what ways can we be courageous to get it wrong, and partnering with and walking alongside folks in those moments where it might be, I think something there might have gone a little bit wrong. Maybe I could be that courageous one to point this out and to notice and name so that we can collectively go forward.
That was meant to have a quote on it. I love that. And I actually think something that I've learned along the way might be really helpful here. And one of them, so we talked about like, how do you interrupt a conversation that might be going sideways, or a pattern that you think is harmful? But also, and so that's like, so just like the language that's shared of like, I notice, or some of the other language that's been shown. One of the things that I think is also real important is to notice when like I've screwed up. And I actually had very poor patterns in my apologies. Often I was centering my intent. Well, I meant it well. I just wanted to, and like, yeah, this, I'm sorry, but I don't know how many of you can relate to me, but like the ways, and this is like, I notice it when somebody else screws up an apology to me, right? Like my husband needs to apologize for something and he'll be like, yeah, I'm sorry I said that, but what I really, and I'm like, no, don't say but in there. Or like the little guy next door will do something to my daughter and he's like, well, I just wanted to, So here's what I noticed in myself is I have to get really clear, not about what I should have done, because sometimes I don't know, but I know that I want the relationship, and that I never, ever want my behavior to cause harm to somebody else. So what I can do in those moments when I know or think that I may have caused harm is to say, I'm sorry. That is the most important one. And I'm shocked by how hard it is, because sometimes I have to say it in the moment. Sometimes I have to go back to somebody and say, I don't know if this landed wrong for you, but I'm realizing it doesn't feel good in me, and I'm sorry. Now, I had a tendency for a long time to make the apology about me, to be like, and then I've been crying for days because I felt so bad about it. Or I just really wanted to connect with you. I have had to learn to say, I'm sorry. If you'd like to tell me about the impact on you, I am listening. And then also say, and I am going to go do my homework and I will do this differently next time. Right? So there are like layers of apologies, but the first thing is to name it, to name the impact, and then to name the steps that you will take so that it's different. Now, again, I can get really tied up in myself about like, well, and I'm going to read some books and I'm going to attend some sessions and I have to like start proving that I'm going to be good. No, those are all things that make the apology more about me. And in some moments, I need to own what I did and how I will change that in the future, because I genuinely want to serve and support, and I do not want to do harm. And there is a way in apologies that sometimes we can do harm by justifying our behavior, by telling them what we meant to do. But instead, if we can normalize, I'm sorry, and I won't do that again. And I'm going to do some reflection so that whatever was in there that was driving that thing, that I thought it was okay to harm you in that moment, I'm going to go undo that. Jordan, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, I mean, I'm loving the chat right now. I feel like folks are taking a lot of things away, just tangible tools for this. I was thinking about just intent versus impact, and what you were kind of mentioning on there. I know we hit on this earlier, but this is just a quick. Sorry, it looks a little. This is a slide deck I like to use, and it's simply a vase. It's a broken vase, and why I like this photo is because when we talk about apologies, relationship buildings, talking with folks, I think about this. You can see next to it, there's a hammer, right? So you can imagine that one person possibly took a hammer to the pot and broke the vase, and now it looks like that. Now imagine, same pot was put together, you were carrying 5 groceries in and the pot, you fell and it broke. One of the things that I think Danica really hit on is, regardless of whether it was intentional with the mallet or whether it was you fell while you were walking inside with the groceries, we have a broken pot. And might I argue that some of the reasons that some of our Rotarians might not stay in our club or feel like it's an inclusion or feel like they can't belong is because there might have been a piece of them that was broken when they experienced or came into the club or had something. And maybe an apology could have been that starting point for them to say, I'm seen, they're understanding, and they're listening to it. And so I think that delineation between intention versus impact, whether it was intentional or whether it was possibly unearned harm, remembering that if the vase is broken, or if a person might have experienced something, not say the folks are broken, but if they're harmed by the system or by an experience, then we have that responsibility to meaningfully apologize and own that so that we can truly move forward together.
I love that. I'm like a huge fan of analogies. So I'm just going to throw out another one. I saw a picture and I don't have it ready to pull up. So I apologize. I don't have a visual for you, but you can imagine there is a car parked and the driver is out. There's like the bicyclist is like laying on the ground. The bicycle's broken. The bicyclist is like wounded. And the driver comes up and goes, oh my God, I didn't mean to hit you. I'm a really good driver. And I saw that and I was like, oh man, how often do I do that? I didn't mean to hurt you. And I'm actually a really good person. Instead of saying, I just hit you with my car. Let me help take care of this, right? Like there are patterns in our behavior because they are the dominant culture way of saying, wait, I've got to protect myself. What if, as Rotarians and humans and beautiful souls that truly want to make space for other people, we said, I see you and I see that there has been harm done. And I have a role in that harm. How do I fix this? Right?
Danica and Jordan, I'd like to share a little story about experience and about learning and changing from it. I'm going to take you back many years when I was hitchhiking around Great Britain and Europe and kind of ran out of money. So took a job in London in the main post office, very low paying, of course, so it attracted people like me. And it also had many, many Black and brown people working there. In fact, I was a minority of about 3 people in groups of hundreds of people that worked there. I have never been as a white person in a minority visual before. I felt that maybe people were going to call me out, harm me in some way. I felt a whole different feeling than I had felt all my life. And many of us have never felt that. And so as soon as I felt that and worked there for 3 months and became friends with all sorts of people of all different colors and races. But in the beginning, I felt afraid, physically afraid, as well as emotionally afraid. And that was a defining moment in my life. And I was early 20s, 21 maybe. I think that experience is something that I was able to take and learn from and hopefully help others. So that's from the old and the hopefully wiser woman. Thanks.
Sandy, thank you. Thank you for sharing that learning. I love when folks relate in. I love when we relate and say, yeah, there was a moment when I did that. And sometimes there are also differences and holding the both and. Jordan, what have you got for us? I know that you were saying that you were going to add some more, and I want to recognize we're getting nearish the endish.
No, I know. I just appreciate you sharing that, Sandy, and entering the space as well. And just like, and I think the thing that I love as well is if any of this work feels hard, yes, part of it is. But you know, it was also hard getting a bunch of Rotarians onto Zoom when the pandemic hit to figure out how to operate Zoom and make all these things happen. I don't know if you all notice how hard that was. Our club, my club in San Diego, we're about 515 members, and to get our average age is about 74, and to get all the folks just technologically caught up to be able to do it all was a challenge. But here's why I say that. I say that as a joke, but I also say that as a reality of if there's one thing that we are capable of, particularly as Rotarians, it's changing inequities, injustices that we see in the world, but also thinking about what things might exist in myself that I can change. And what are the ways that I can have these better conversations, these meaningful conversations to build this better world and better friendships. Literally, the tools that we're talking about in this closing session is for us to build goodwill and better friendships in a more authentic way. This is us saying, right now, we're coming out of COVID, we're getting back out of Zoom, but we can really take it to an entirely another level. So I just want to appreciate you all for leaning into this space, for hearing the tools, for being able to be questioned, challenged, and things to even just consider about. For Danica talking about things, I wrote down like name and noticing, coming with curiosity, listening to understand some of the tools to have these conversations so that we can really build goodwill and better friendships. Because that's really, as Rotarians, what we're about, Danica. So that was on my heart, just gratitude.
Thank you, Jordan. I also feel this gratitude, and I want to name something else because often we talk about how hard this can be. And it's hard in different ways. And it's really, and actually, I keep hearing from the Rotarians that I've been working for is like, sometimes can actually feel really good too, to ask the questions, to talk with other people, to like see that in some ways we're actually really aligned on some things. And in other ways, we just have like boatloads that we can learn from and about each other. I noticed that the farther I go into this work, as you said, Jordan, I learn a lot about the world and the ways that things are built, but I also learn a lot about myself. And my relationship with others and myself is deeper now than it has ever been. So like, yeah, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but just like learn to get into Zoom, like that frustration, there is a payoff that we don't talk about. We don't talk about like, it is going to be extraordinary when Rotary deepens its impact. When like instead of having to solve the same problems over and over again and show up to like make sure that kids have school supplies in schools, you actually get to the root of the problem and go, wait, what's wrong with our communities and our schools that kids don't have the supplies they need? The deeper you go into this work, the deeper our impact will be and the more lasting like our commitments and our contributions can be. I just think it's so beautiful. Like, what will it look like? And somebody mentioned it earlier at the 100-year celebration of Rotary, when you look around and folks come from all backgrounds, ages, sizes, perspectives. And I know you're an ideology. I know you have like ideologies and professions, but like, what if the true diversity showed up in the room and stayed in the room and felt like they could contribute to the room? What would your relationships look like? Like, what would your impact look like? What would your meetings look like? Would you have dance parties? Would you have better food? Would you have really cool music playing? Where might you host an event that you would never even think about hosting it now? Like, what might you do that right now we just go, oh, we can never do that. But in 5 years, you're like, damn, we just took that to the next level and we did it together. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this with you. I just love every second of this. Thank you.
I'm going to ask one more thing, Danica. I'm going to ask one more thing or two more things. I'm going to need y'all in the chat for this one. All right, Rotarians. One thing I also know that we are big dreamers. So I want to bring us back to our work and connect it to ask for us to do. First, I'm going to ask us this in the chat, and the same thing, we'll do the waterfall approach. If you all can write down if you close your eyes, Danica talked about getting to the roots of things. What is one issue, inequity, injustice in the world that's bugging you? Just type it in. Don't send it yet. Just type it in. What's that one thing that you're like, with Rotary, I want to address this? What is that thing? Okay. And I'm gonna have you all type it in. 1, 2, 3. Just go ahead and send it. Go ahead and send it. Because I just saw folks coming in. So just go ahead and send it. Go ahead and send it. Okay. Income inequality, women's rights, gender equality, peace building, oppression, the legal system, poverty, white privilege, racism, Rotary getting a female president. Come on. Vaccine access, misogyny, lack of basic needs, injustice, peace building, global poverty. That's real. Climate change. Okay. I'm going to ask you all, there's so much going on. And the beauty is, in Rotary, we can hold and address and bring folks together. Address stupidity. Addressing stupidity. I'm here for it. I love it. So much right. Okay. Today we went through a lot. And we talked about a lot of different topics. And Danica, if you're comfortable with this, I'm wondering if you all can just put in one commitment or question or something you're walking away with? Something as you think about now, don't send it yet. Don't send it yet, because we're asking you to do the same thing. As you think about the issues that you want to address, some of the pressing challenges, and I just want you to put in either one commitment or one question that you're walking with today. And if you could do both, props for that. Like if you could do both, but either one commitment, if it's a way you're going to ask a question or a way you want to approach someone. And Danica, let me know if there's anything you want to add to this of just a takeaway of what you want folks to walk with. And this is something you're saying, this is something that I'm going to commit to, a mindset I'm going to develop, something like that. So just dig deep and think of something, and I'll tell you all in 3 seconds to send it in, and we'll go from there. And so I'll give you about 10 more seconds just to type it in. So just thinking about what is a key takeaway, a key question, a key learning, something that you want to take with you into this next year as we continue Rotary, continue whatever world looks like post-COVID, and go from there. So here we go in 3, 2, I hope 100% of folks attend. Go, 1, go, send it in.
Oh, I got to participate this time, Jordan. It was super fun. I love this.
Sorry, be a better listener. Good to learn more how to be more courageous. Perfect. Danica.
I commit to making mistakes. I already typed one in, but I commit to making mistakes. It is so hard. I want to be perfect and good, and it is really hard to be messy in front of other people in a way that I didn't pre-plan. Can I share something with y'all really quickly? So I think that one of the greatest things an organization can do is make weird normal. And one of the ways I do it, and you don't have to do it with me, I just want to show you. And because if like, I think one of the ways that we can have the most impact in our own lives is to make weird normal. So I feel better every time I do this, but I will literally turn on music. This is in my own life, and this is when I work with organizations, but I will like do weird dancing. Like, so there's like, I'm dancing and I look good. I might not look as good as you, but I'm still good. And then there's like elbow dancing with my knees involved. And like, I will have whole conversations where we're like, okay, only move in straight lines. And I'll tell you what, you want to talk about creating norms where people feel like they can just be themselves, where people can be brave and courageous, work your way there. Sometimes it just starts with taking breaths, and then it starts with just moving your body, and then it starts with like playing some songs so people get comfortable with it. And then like 2 months later, you're like, elbow dance, da, 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 da. But it disrupts the systems that say, this is how we behave. And it creates the systems where people go, oh, look, we're doing weird stuff today, and we're going to get outside the box. And it does something in our brains and in our collective consciousness where we can like show up and be different together, like our full self. So take it or leave it. Weird dancing. I believe it's the key to the social justice movement. Just saying. Jordan, I'm sure you have some brilliant.
I can't follow that. What's the elbow start moving? I can't follow that. That was amazing. That was amazing. I'll pass it to Kimber.
I get the privilege of kind of closing this out. I hope I'm not premature. I think we're at that time now. So what I've heard today is hard to summarize because there's been a lot of emotional conversation and a lot of content, a lot for us to chew on. But the thing that I feel the most right now is that you have both offered us a space to be able to be brave. And that's a gift. And so I want to close this out with just an enormous amount of gratitude in the gift that you guys have given this district and this crowd of people for us to be able to begin hard decisions and hard discussions and to converse in a way that creates bigger impact as Rotarians. So with that, I'd like to send it back to Stacy and hope everybody has a wonderful day. And thank you so much, Danica and Jordan, for your contributions today. And I think you've changed lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimber. Yes, I would say that is a safe statement, Kimber. And I want to add another shout out to every individual on this call, those of you that contributed such thought-provoking and brave comments in the chat, and those of you who showed up silently but as participants that added just as much value to this space. And I feel like it's safe to say we're all just going to go forward on our Rotary journeys, springing into action. I'm one for those little phrases, but really it's going to pop up for us throughout the day, the week, throughout our Rotary year, snips of something we've heard in these conversations, learn from our presenters and from each other, that's going to add real value to our clubs and the work that we're doing. So we have just the tail end of our conference today, which will be, the rest will be guided by Acting District Governor Bob Quay, who's been acting in the background all along as our technical extraordinaire.
As soon as I get the microphone unmuted, you can hear me.
Great.
Just like to say a few words, and I'll keep it short because this has been a long session, but I think everyone would agree that this has been a different year. It's been a difficult year. We wish that Tim were here with us, but with the situation with Cindy, that's just not possible. So I am really encouraged with the way that the governor line has stepped up and shared the load of moving the district forward. I think we have learned a lot, and I'm also encouraged by what I see with the clubs. And this shouldn't surprise me, but the clubs have been phenomenal. When the COVID first hit, there were a lot of clubs that stepped forward in their community and said, what can we do to help? We're here. How can we make this better? And you've continued to do that. Right now, we are leading the zone in our giving for Polio Plus. Alan has done a great job with the foundation this year, but in this time of need and of uncertainty, everyone has stepped forward. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think this is a period where we're going to learn. We're going to have new things come out, but we're going to be stronger on the other end. And I'm looking forward to Lynn's year because I'm hoping we can get back a little more to normal, although I don't know what normal is anymore. I think things have changed so that we're going to continue doing the good in the world that we do, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. So, Lynn, have you got any closing remarks?
Not very different from my opening remarks. Everybody pretty much knows that I'm interested in seeing changes and seeing what we can be. That's just what I took away from Danica and Jordan and all of you guys here today, and the things that you were saying in the chat and the things that hopefully you're thinking in your heads is we're kind of, Bob and I were talking about it. We're kind of used to changing. And so let's just keep rolling with the changes and see what kind of beautiful, positive things we can pull out of this and do for our communities.
Really want to thank everybody for showing up today. I know it's, at least here, it's beautiful outside, and I think it is most places. So we'll let you get back out going with that. And we'll let you know when we've got the date nailed down for our last session in June. And it was great to see everybody again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes I like doing the having everybody unmute and say goodbye. That's kind of fun.
Bye.
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 Get out in the sunshine.
Bye, and thank you.